The story begins in the sterile, high-security environment of a bustling shipping port in Hong Kong, where the sheer scale of international commerce masks a far more sinister exchange. Beneath the watchful eyes of heavy security, a massive shipping container is meticulously moved across the yard, its contents far more volatile than the industrial goods it purports to carry. When the heavy steel doors finally creak open, they reveal not just crates, but a man named Ivan, who has spent the arduous journey entombed with $1.5 billion in illicit cash. This staggering sum has been funneled from Spain to the east, and for his role as the silent guardian of this fortune, Ivan stands to earn a commission that would transform any ordinary life, a staggering $3.8 billion. Yet, as he steps out into the humid air, the narrative shifts back several years to uncover the desperate origins of a man willing to risk such a claustrophobic descent into the underworld. Years earlier, Ivan's reality was far removed from the world of international finance. He was a young man from the modest neighborhood of Vallecas, navigating the streets of Madrid in a Ferrari that did not belong to him. Working as a valet at a prestigious luxury hotel, he spent his nights parking the playthings of the elite, returning home soaked by the rain to a family struggling under the weight of financial ruin. His father, once a proud owner of a flourishing catering business, had been hollowed out by an economic recession that left him bitter and defeated, spending his days hurling futile insults at the news on television. Observing his father's collapse, a cold resolve hardened within Ivan during his childhood. He would acquire wealth by any means necessary, refusing to let the whims of the economy dictate his worth. At the hotel, Ivan was not merely a servant, he was an observer, carefully studying the powerful figures who frequented the establishment and dreaming of a way to infiltrate their ranks. His ambition was often met with ridicule. When he proposed a sophisticated real estate scheme to his friends, buying, renovating, and flipping flats for profit, they mocked his poverty, unable to see the predator lurking beneath the valet uniform. The catalyst for his transformation arrived in the form of Laris, a high-ranking government minister who arrived at the hotel so severely intoxicated he could barely stand. Recognizing a golden opportunity, Ivan assisted the official, but his true focus was the briefcase Laris clutched, a vessel of secrets that Ivan spent the night investigating while the minister remained oblivious in a drunken stupor. Inside the briefcase, Ivan discovered a sum of money that dwarfed anything he had ever seen, and with a calculated risk, he siphoned off a portion for himself before delivering the rest to its intended recipient, a woman named Mary. Upon meeting her, Ivan did not retreat into the shadows. Instead, he used his natural charisma to weave a web of persuasion, subtly disparaging the loyalty of politicians like Laris while offering his own services. When Mary realized the count in the briefcase was short, she was not deterred by the discrepancy. Rather, she was captivated by Ivan's unwavering confidence. She offered him a position as a courier, promising 10,000 euros for every delivery, a pact that officially signaled Ivan's entry into the high-stakes world of international money laundering. Ivan's first true trial as a shadow operative began with a seemingly mundane delivery, a horse for a young girl named Sonia, the daughter of a man named Javi. Javi was a titan of the local economy, a man who had once worked in a humble coffee shop before parlaying his connections with the powerful into an empire of financial transformation. Beneath the pretext of a birthday gift, Ivan was tasked with transporting a briefcase of staggering wealth back to Mary. The transition from valet to courier was fraught with immediate peril when the police intercepted his vehicle, their suspicions piqued by the young man's nervous intensity. When they discovered the cash, Ivan did not crumble. He spun a desperate tale of a house sale, but the officers, unmoved, slammed him against the chassis of his car to extract a confession. In a moment of sheer audacity, Ivan pivoted, scolding the officers and threatening to contact their superiors, a gamble that miraculously forced them to retreat. Only later did the chilling truth emerge. The entire encounter had been a meticulously orchestrated theater by Mary to test his mettle under fire. Having passed this baptism of fear, Ivan was welcomed into the inner circle, introduced to Mary's husband, Francis, the son of a notorious diamond mafia figure, and granted access to a world of opulence and high-stakes currency exchange.
El dinero negro ya era dinero blanco.
As the euro began to flood Spain, fueling a volatile real estate bubble, Ivan's ascent became meteoric. He watched as Javi laundered the black money of corrupt politicians and businessmen, turning illicit gains into legitimate assets with the clinical precision of a surgeon. Despite warnings to keep his distance from Sonia, Ivan's ambition knew no boundaries, and he began to eye a partnership that transcended mere courier work. His gaze soon fell upon Geneva, a new frontier for their operations, but it was a chance encounter in a restaurant that provided his next leverage. He spotted a middle-aged man named Louis in the company of a much younger woman, a sight that Mary dismissed as the simple byproduct of the man's vast wealth. Ivan, however, saw a vulnerability. He tracked the couple to a hotel, intending to plant a hidden camera to capture Lewis's extramarital indiscretions. Though he was caught red-handed by a security guard named Yannick, the confrontation did not end in arrest. Instead, it forged an alliance. Yannick, recognizing a fellow predator, demanded a partnership in exchange for his silence and his technical expertise. With the incriminating footage in hand, Ivan and Yannick cornered Lewis, forcing the man to become an unwilling architect of their expansion. Lewis was coerced into introducing Ivan to the elite circles of the city, portraying the former valet as a trustworthy and sophisticated financier. However, this rapid expansion did not go unnoticed. A specialized police task force led by a senior officer named Roy began to monitor their movements, marking Ivan as a significant new player in the money laundering landscape. Despite the encroaching shadows of the law and the growing resentment of Javi, who viewed Ivan's independent ventures as a direct betrayal, Ivan refused to decelerate. He returned to his family in Madrid draped in the trappings of success, lying to his father about an import-export business, only to find that his old friends had stolen his original real estate ideas to build their own fortune. The sting of their betrayal only fueled his arrogance. He demanded respect from his peers, convinced that his status as the highest earner in their community made him untouchable.
¿Qué pasa? Vale, tranquilo.
Sed listos. Iros de Marbella. Bien.
¿Tú?
As the walls began to close in, Mary delivered a chilling warning. The authorities had launched a formal investigation into Javi's empire, and any connection to him was now a potential death sentence for their careers. She urged Ivan to retreat into the shadows and suspend his operations, but his arrogance had become a blinding shroud. Instead of hiding, Ivan executed a breathtakingly cold maneuver. He approached the very man hunting them, the senior officer Roy, and offered a devil's bargain. Claiming to be a mere subordinate, he promised to deliver the evidence needed to dismantle Javi in exchange for total police protection. To ensure his own safety during the impending fallout, he seduced Javi's daughter, Sonia, whisking her away on a whirlwind trip to Paris. While he played the role of the devoted lover, fulfilling her every whim, he was secretly orchestrating her father's ruin from across the border. The betrayal bore bitter fruit when Sonia witnessed her father's televised arrest, her world shattering in an instant. Upon their return to Madrid, the facade of Ivan's fake love crumbled entirely when she discovered his infidelity, realizing she had been nothing more than a pawn in a high-stakes game of corporate chess. With Javi behind bars, Ivan's hunger for power remained unsated, yet even Mary recoiled at his next move. She refused to touch Javi's client list, fearing the police were already using it as a roadmap to their next target. Forced into a period of restless inactivity, Ivan spiraled, squandering his vast reserves of wealth on a hedonistic blur of travel and excess. When the money finally ran dry, he crawled back to his mother's doorstep, only to be met with a final, crushing blow. His father had passed away in his absence, leaving Ivan as the sole, hollow support for a family he had long neglected. Driven by a desperate need to reclaim his status, Ivan turned his sights toward the Chinese mafia and a shadowy operative named Tony. Tony moved vast sums of black money to the east, but his methods were archaic, leaving his couriers vulnerable to detection. Seizing the moment, Ivan proposed a revolutionary solution to a new crisis. With Swiss security tightening and clients clamoring for physical cash, Ivan would use his remaining connections to move Tony's stuck Swiss funds into Chinese accounts in exchange for immediate liquidity. The plan was a triumph of illicit engineering, but the celebration was short-lived. In a tense restaurant confrontation, a newly released Javi, having bribed his way to freedom, vowed a bloody revenge against the man who had sold him to the state. The fragile architecture of Ivan's world finally collapsed when a whistleblower within their own software department leaked the Swiss bank account lists directly to the police. As his partners, Mr. Tools and Francis, fled into the night with the remaining capital, Ivan and Mary found themselves hunted not only by the law but by Tony's enforcers, who suspected Ivan of the leak. Facing a terminal sentence at the end of a barrel, Ivan pleaded for one final chance, a suicide mission to personally escort Tony's fortune from Spain to Hong Kong, entombed within a shipping container to evade both the police and the vengeful Javi. It was this desperate gambit that led him back to the shipping port, dreaming of a $3.8 billion reprieve. But as the doors opened in Hong Kong, the light revealed not freedom, but the cold steel of handcuffs. Betrayed by Mary to save her own skin and facing 15 years in a Spanish cell, Ivan was left with only the haunting echoes of his parents' warnings. He realized, too late, that the excessive greed which had fueled his meteoric rise had ultimately become the very web that strangled his soul. As the cold steel of the Hong Kong police's handcuffs tightened around his wrists, The $3.8 billion dream evaporated like a desert mirage. The grand plan to vanish into the anonymity of the East had been compromised, and Ivan found himself extradited back to the very soil where his journey into the darkness had begun. Stripped of his designer suits and the arrogant shield of his wealth, he sat in a sterile interrogation room, the silence punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic ticking of a clock that seemed to count down the remaining years of his youth. His only hope rested with a high-priced legal defense, yet even the most skilled lawyer could not ignore the mountain of evidence the authorities had amassed. When the news arrived that he was facing a certain 15-year sentence, the gravity of his downfall finally shattered his stoic composure. In a final, desperate act of a drowning man, Ivan attempted to reach out to the senior officer Roy, hoping that even the most dedicated servant of the law had a price. He sought to bribe his way out of the inevitable, but Roy remained an immovable pillar of integrity, his refusal serving as a definitive closing of the door on Ivan's freedom. It was in this state of total isolation that the ultimate betrayal was revealed. Mary, the woman who had nurtured his ambition and shared in his illicit triumphs, had meticulously framed him to the authorities to secure her own immunity. She had sacrificed her most loyal courier to ensure her own escape from the wreckage of their empire. From the confines of his cell, Ivan watched a flickering news report detailing the arrest of Tony and the final dismantling of the Chinese laundering network, realizing that the entire house of cards had been razed to the ground. In the oppressive quiet of the prison, the voices of his parents finally returned to him, not as the nagging reminders of a life he had outgrown, but as a profound and painful truth. They had warned him that a life built on the shifting sands of greed would eventually collapse, burying the architect beneath it. As the heavy iron door of his future slammed shut, Ivan was left to contemplate the wreckage of a life consumed by an insatiable hunger for more, trapped forever in a web of his own making.